वेलकम एवरीबॉडी टू नीट डेन। आप सबका नीट डेन में स्वागत है। आज हम बायोलॉजिकल क्लासिफिकेशन ये चैप्टर का लास्ट पार्ट देखेंगे, दैट इज पार्ट 5। So before we go to part 5, let us revise what we have learned in part 4. तो part 4 में हमने क्या देखे थे? We had seen kingdom fungi, and this kingdom fungi was divided into phycomycetes, ascomycetes, बैसिडियोमाइसिटिस। और ये तीनों क्लासेस ऑफ फंगाई को परफेक्ट फंगाई बोलते हैं बिकॉज दे हैव बोथ सेक्सुअल एज वेल एज एसेक्सुअल मोड्स ऑफ रिप्रोडक्शन, whereas the last class, that is deuteromycetes, is called as imperfect fungi because it does not show sexual mode of reproduction. Only asexual mode of reproduction is seen. So let us see examples of phycomycetes. कौन से फंगाई है फाइकोमाइसिटिस में? म्यूकर राइजोपस, जो कि ब्रेड पे आते हैं फंगस, एंड एल्ब्यूगो विच ग्रो ऑन द लीव्स ऑफ द प्लांट लाइक मस्टर्ड लीव्स। एग्जांपल्स ऑफ ascomycetes or sac-like fungi are penicillium, from which we can develop antibiotic penicillin, yeast, which are commonly used for fermentation, for making bread and also fermentation of alcohol, and other fungi like aspergillus, claviceps, neurospora, and also morels and truffles, which are also eaten. They are delicacies in certain parts of the world. Basidiomycetes. Examples are mushrooms, bracket fungi, and certain parasites of plants like rust and smut. And lastly, examples of deuteromycetes. कौन से examples है? Alternaria, Calectotrichum, and Trichoderma. All these deuteromycetes mostly are plant pathogens. Plants में disease produce करते हैं ये. At the same time, Alternaria can also cause allergic reactions in human beings. Their spores can cause allergic reactions in human beings, like bronchial asthma. What are the various other features of these fungi? आप देखेंगे फाइकोमाइसिटिस में ही सिर्फ हाइफे aseptate होते हैं, which are also called as coenocytic hyphae, whereas the rest of all the fungi have septate hyphae. They have septate hyphae. As far as the sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction is concerned, in phycomycetes, the asexual spores are zoospores and aplanospores. So zoospores, they are motile spores, and aplanospores are immotile spores. Whereas sexual reproduction जो है in phycomycetes, वो zygospores के थ्रू होता है. zygospores वो डिप्लॉइड स्पोर्स होते हैं जो हैप्लॉइड स्पोर्स प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, एंड जो फ्रूटिंग बॉडी होता है उसको बोलते हैं zygosporangium. Whereas ascomycetes में asexual स्पोर्स रहते हैं कोनिडिया, और सेक्सुअल स्पोर्स रहते हैं एस्कोस्पोर्स, जो कि सैक लाइक बैग लाइक स्ट्रक्चर में प्रोड्यूस होते हैं, जिनका नाम होता है एस्की, और फ्रूटिंग बॉडीज को एस्कोकार्प कहते हैं. बैसिडियोमाइसिटिस में जनरली एसेक्सुअल स्पोर्स नहीं होते हैं. एसेक्सुअल रिप्रोडक्शन फ्रेगमेंटेशन से होता है, एंड द सेक्सुअल रिप्रोडक्शन occurs with the help of basidiospores, which are haploid spores, जो basidium से प्रोड्यूस होते हैं. basidium is a diploid parent cell from which haploid spores, that is basidiospores, are produced. और fruiting body को basidiocarps कहते हैं. In deuteromycetes, only asexual reproduction occurs. No sexual reproduction is identified, and generally asexual spores, conidia, take part in asexual reproduction or it occurs by vegetative means. आप देखेंगे all the classes of fungi are saprophytic as well as parasitic. Only the ascomycetes, they are also decomposers and they are also coprophilous. That means they grow on dung. Whereas deuteromycetes are also decomposed of litter, कचरा जो कि हमारे आजू बाजू रहता है, and also they help in mineral cycling. So this was a recap of the kingdom fungus, that is revision of part 4 of this particular chapter. So now let us move on to part 5. So till now we have seen the 5 kingdom classification, which consisted of Monera, Protista, fungi. Till now we have seen up till fungi. And today we are going to see in this part 5 viruses, viroids, prions, and lichens. And at the same time, we are just going to see introduction of kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia. But you will find that these viruses, viroids, prions, and lichens are not a part of 5 kingdom classification. So let us see these viruses, viroids, prions, and lichens. So first we will see in detail viruses. Now, how do we remember viruses? Very commonly, हमको common cold होता है, जिसमें sneezing होती है, coughing होती है. We also get fever, which we also commonly call as flu. So viruses very commonly cause common cold in human beings. But these viruses have got no mention in 5 kingdom classification of Whitaker. Why? Because these viruses are acellular structures. They don't have any cell structure. As we see cell structure in the rest of the kingdoms, but cell structure is not present in viruses, and hence they are not considered as truly living organisms. Hence, they have also not been included in 5 kingdom classification. So viruses are non-cellular organisms. No cells are present. And they are mostly present as inert, that is non-active, बिल्कुल भी एक्टिव नहीं रहते हैं. तब जब वो outside any living cell रहते हैं. That means they need a living cell to become active. So when they are outside the living cell, they are inert, that is inactive, and mostly in the crystalline form. But once they enter a living cell, which is also called as a host cell, they become active. They take on the machinery of the host cell and they grow and replicate themselves. That means वो खुद को मल्टीप्लाई करते हैं होस्ट सेल के अंदर, जब वो एक होस्ट सेल के अंदर चले जाते हैं. और because of this multiplication and replication, they generally kill the host cell. तो ये देख रहे हैं हम, एक ये वायरस है जो कि ये एक लिविंग होस्ट सेल के अंदर एंटर हो रहा है, एंटर हो गया है. अब ये लिविंग सेल के अंदर अपना न्यूक्लियर मटेरियल डालेगा होस्ट सेल के न्यूक्लियस से, और उसमें से ये रेप्लिकेट होगा, मल्टीपल वायरसेस प्रोड्यूस होंगे, और वो वायरसेस जो है ये लिविंग सेल के में से निकलेंगे. They will keep on budding out of this living cell. So while they bud out of this living cell, they will cause lysis of the membrane, plasma membrane or cell membrane of this living cell. So the living cell will die because of this. Now, what is the meaning of this word virus? ये word virus कहाँ से आ रहा है? वायरस का मीनिंग है वीनम. वीनम जनरली हम किससे एसोसिएट करते हैं? स्नेक से. स्नेक वीनम है ना, जो कि पॉइजनस फ्लूइड रहता है. तो वायरस का मीनिंग है वीनम और पॉइजनस फ्लूइड. एंड how the word virus evolved basically. So Dmitry Ivanovsky in 1892 recognized these viruses. How? He recognized them as microbes which are casually present on tobacco plant. And when they are present on tobacco plant, they produce mosaic disease of the tobacco plant. So he found out that these viruses, these organisms are very, very small. They are even smaller than bacteria because he passed these viruses through बैक्टीरिया प्रूफ फिल्टर्स जिसमें से बैक्टीरिया नहीं पास हो सकते, लेकिन ये स्मॉल ऑर्गेनिज्म पास हुए जिनको लेटर ऑन हम वायरसेस बोलने लगे. So he found out that they are smaller than bacteria. Later, M.W. Bijerenic, he found out that ये जो टोबैको प्लांट है जो कि ये वायरसेस जिसके अंदर है जो प्रोड्यूस करते हैं मोज़ेक डिसीज, ये टोबैको प्लांट का हमने अगर एक्सट्रैक्ट निकाले और वो किसी दूसरे हेल्दी प्लांट में इंजेक्ट करे तो वो हेल्दी प्लांट भी इन्फेक्ट हो जाता है. दैट मीन्स दिस एक्सट्रैक्ट कैन इन्फेक्ट अदर प्लांट and hence we started calling this virus, this particular organism as virus, infectious or poisonous organism. So this fluid he called as contagium vivum fluidum, that is infectious living fluid. ये फ्लूइड है वो एक्सट्रैक्ट जो कि इन्फेक्टेड टोबैको प्लांट से निकाला गया. In 1935, W.M. Stanley also found that these viruses, these organisms, are crystalline. They can be crystallized. क्रिस्टल के फॉर्म में उनको हम प्रिजर्व कर सकते हैं और वो मेनली प्रोटीन्स के बने होते हैं. So they are largely made up of proteins. Also, when they are outside the host cell, they are inert. This we have already seen, but this was first discovered by Bijerenic by Stanley in 1935. So they are inert outside the host cell and they are obligate parasites. That means, what is the meaning of obligate parasite? That means it definitely needs a host cell to complete its life cycle. If it does not infect the host cell, that it cannot complete its life cycle. That means it cannot multiply and produce more viruses. As compared to obligate parasites, there are facultative parasites, okay, which do not definitely need a host cell to complete their life cycle. But obligate parasites, like viruses, definitely need a host cell to complete their life cycle. So we saw that Stanley found out that viruses basically consist of proteins. But in addition to proteins, viruses also contain genetic material like RNA and DNA. You see, even our cells have RNAs and DNA. So similarly, viruses also have RNAs and DNAs. RNA is ribonucleic acid, DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. You can see in this picture a single strand of RNA and double strand of DNA. So, however, no virus has both RNA and DNA. A virus will only have RNA or DNA. Thus, a virus is a nucleoprotein and the genetic material, this genetic material that is RNA or DNA which it possesses is infectious. That means when it enters the host cell, it will infect the host cell. In general, viruses that infect the plants have a single-stranded RNA, as you are seeing in this particular picture. Whereas viruses that infect the animals have either single-stranded RNA or double-stranded RNA or double-stranded DNA. So let us see, this is a picture of HIV virus. I hope everybody knows this HIV virus also produces AIDS in human beings, isn't it? Now you can see in this particular virus, there is a single-stranded RNA. So this is an RNA virus. Now there are certain viruses which also infect bacteria and they are called as bacteriophages. And they are usually double-stranded DNA viruses. So this is a picture of a bacteriophage which consists of a head, a collar, a sheath, and also tail fibers. Now, so this particular virus is made up of nucleoprotein. There is protein as well as there is nuclear membrane materials, the nuclear materials, genetic materials, that is RNA as well as DNA. Now this RNA or DNA which is present inside this virus is covered by a coat which is made up of proteins. And this coat is called as capsid. You can see there are two types of coats here. This is one type of virus containing a coat which is forming a helix, spring-like covering around this nuclear material. Whereas in this particular virus, it is forming a polyhedral shape around the nuclear material. So this is called as a capsid, and it is made up of small structures called as small structures or subunits called as capsomeres. And this capsid protects the nucleic acid or the RNAs or DNAs which are present inside this virus. These capsomeres, they are either forming a helix or they are forming a polyhedral shape around the nucleic acid, RNA or DNA. Thus, we know now that viruses can cause a lot of diseases in human beings like mumps, smallpox, herpes, influenza, AIDS, even corona was caused by virus, and hepatitis. And there are so many more diseases. In plants, generally, whenever the plant is infected with virus, there can be mosaic formation. Now, this is a tobacco mosaic virus. We had already seen this virus also has got a RNA, nucleic acid, which is covered by a capsid protein, which is in a helical form. So the mosaic formation means there is alteration of dark and light green color on the leaf, or there may be rolling of the leaf or curling of the leaf, or yellowing or vein clearing, dwarfing, or growth retardation in the plant. So a virus, when infects the plant, can produce so many features, symptoms in this particular plant. So this was all about viruses. Let us move on to next particles, next organism called as viroids. So it was T.O. Dinner in 1971 who discovered these new infectious agents. They are also infectious agents, remember. They produce infections and diseases in plants and animals. So these particles he found were smaller than viruses, and they had only nucleic acid, which was free RNA. It had no capsid around it. So there was no protein coat or capsid around it like viruses. And he named them as viroids. The RNA which is present in these viroids is of low molecular weight. So viroids have only free RNA, no capsid, and these RNAs are also of low molecular weight. And the disease which he discovered caused by these viroids was potato spindle tuber disease. So which was caused in potatoes. Next particle, infectious particle or organism is called as prions. So what is prions? Prions are abnormally folded proteins. You can see this is a protein which is abnormally folded. So these are prions. And these prions are considered to be infectious. They infect various organisms like even plants, animals as well as human beings, and they are transmitted also from one organism to another. These prions are similar to that of viruses, okay? And the diseases caused by these prions are in cattle. The disease is called as bovine spongiform encephalopathy. Now, what is the meaning of this word encephalopathy? It is infection or disease of the brain. Okay. So remember, prions generally cause neurological disease, that is disease of the brain or the nerve. So brain, when it gets involved with neurons in cattle, it produces bovine spongiform encephalopathy, also called as mad cow disease. Whereas in human beings, it produces a similar kind of disease, which is called as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, CJD. So this is prions. Coming next to lichen. Now we have already seen lichens earlier in fungus, okay? Because lichens are symbiotic. symbiotic associations develop, that is mutualism develops between organisms like algae and fungi. So symbiotic association between algae and fungi is called as lichen. And we find that here there is algae in the center, which is covered by fungus, and both of them, they help each other. So this is called as mutualism or symbiotic association. And this is how the lichen looks like on the tree trunk or logs of wood. So here the algae or the algal component is called as phycobiont. And remember, these algae are autotrophic, they can produce their own food. Whereas the fungal component is called as mycobiont. They are heterotrophic. They depend on these algae for food. So how do these algae and fungi help each other? As algae are autotrophic, they prepare food for fungi, whereas fungi provides shelter to the algae. You can see how it provides shelter to the algae, and it absorbs minerals, nutrients, as well as water for algae. So all these are used by algae to prepare food, which is given to fungi. So this is how the mutualism works. But when you look at this lichen, they are so much intermingled with each other that you cannot make out that they are made up of two different organisms. But lichens are very interesting. They are very good indicators of pollution. Why? Because they do not grow in polluted areas. So if you find lichen in your area, you may consider your area as less polluted or pollution free. So this is a very interesting phenomenon. So this was all about viruses, viroids, prions, and lichens, which are not included in the 5-kingdom classification. Now, we have some introduction of kingdom Plantae as well as kingdom Animalia, which we are going to learn in detail in chapter 5 and chapter 4 respectively. But some features of kingdom Plantae as an introduction. So what does this kingdom consist of? It consists of all eukaryotes, which are chlorophyll containing organisms. So plants are all eukaryotic chlorophyll containing organisms. So you can imagine that Plantae are mostly autotrophic because they contain chlorophyll. And this includes algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, as well as angiosperms. However, some plants are not autotrophic completely. They are partially heterotrophic, like insectivorous plants, bladderwort, as well as Venus flytrap, or they may be even parasites like cascata. So plants have eukaryotic cell structure, and their cell wall is made up of cellulose, which we will see in detail. The plant cell structure we will see in detail in chapter 8. Plants have a life cycle which consists of two phases. One is diploid sporophytic phase, another is haploid gametophytic phase. And these two phases, they alternate with each other. And this is what is called as alternation of generation. Now, the length of these haploid and diploid phases may vary with different groups of plants, as well as whether these phases are free living or dependent on others also varies with different groups of plants. So this is all in detail we are going to see in chapter 3. Also a short introduction on kingdom Animalia, which we are going to see in detail in chapter 4. So kingdom Animalia are not autotroph, they are heterotroph. They are heterotrophic, they are eukaryotic multicellular organisms, and they do not have cell walls like we see in plants. They are directly or indirectly dependent on plants for food. So they may be herbivores, they may be carnivores, they may be omnivores. They digest, if you see their mode of nutrition, we find that they are holozoic. That means they ingest complex food, they digest it in an internal cavity called as digestive system, and absorb the simpler food nutrients from this particular complex food which has been digested, and preserve these food nutrients in the form of glycogen or fat inside the body. So they have a holozoic mode of nutrition. They follow a definitive growth pattern. They grow up to a certain age, up to adulthood. After that, they stop growing and they acquire a definitive shape as well as size. In higher forms of the kingdom Animalia, we find a very complex sensory neuromotor mechanisms, as well as most of them are capable of locomotion. They can move. The sexual reproduction, mostly in kingdom Animalia, occurs by copulation of male and female, sexual intercourse, fusion of male and female gametes, leading to development of zygote, which develops into an embryo, and this embryo grows and is given birth to as a newborn baby. So all the salient features of this kingdom Animalia we are going to see in chapter 4. So this was our part 5 of biological classification. I hope you have understood the whole chapter. This was the last part of biological classification. So